We're going to learn about synapse. Now, first of all, question is what is synapse? Now, when the sensory neuron ends in the central nervous system, in the central nervous system there are relay neurons. If you guys remember, we have learned sensory neuron, it brings the message from the receptor to the central nervous system, and in the central nervous system there are relay neurons. Now this sensory neuron axon nerve ending and there is the dendrite of the relay neuron. They are not connected together, they are not joined together. There is gap between them. Still the message is transmitted from the axon nerve ending to the dendrite nerve ending. Now how this is transmitted, this is what we are going to learn today. First of all, we are going to learn the structure of the synapse. Now if I draw a synapse, first of all over here, this is the axon nerve ending. Now when I am drawing the axon nerve ending, this axon nerve ending do look like this. It is called door knob shape. You know, sometimes the door knobs, they are round in shape, right? You rotate it, right, and then you can open the door. So this is called door knob shape. And after that, this is the dendrite nerve ending. Now, this axon nerve ending also has another name. In a synapse, this is coming first, right? And the dendrite nerve comes later, right? So as it comes first, this is also called as presynaptic terminal. And the dendrite nerve ending comes later, so this is called what? Postsynaptic terminal. Now, in between the presynaptic terminal and postsynaptic terminal, there is a gap. Now, this gap over here, this gap is called as synaptic cleft. What is it called? Synaptic cleft. Now, we learned yesterday in the receptor cells there are vesicles that contain what? Neurotransmitters. Now, over here, there are vesicles present, and these vesicles, they do contain neurotransmitters in them. Now these vesicles, they have their own name. These vesicles, they are called as synaptic vesicles. What are these vesicles called? Synaptic vesicles. And in these synaptic vesicles, what are present? Neurotransmitters. Now, yesterday, I told you the name of a neurotransmitter. What was it? Who remembers the name of that neurotransmitter? Very good. Acetylcholine. I took another name. Now I told you this acetylcholine is most abundant in the peripheral nervous system, right? There is dopamine, there is serotonin, there is GABA, gamma aminobutyric acid, right? Now these are few of these neurotransmitters of brain. Right? We will talk about them later. First, let's come back over here. Now, yesterday I told you another thing, that these synaptic vesicles, they are bind to the membrane with the help of special proteins. Remember that or not? Now, yesterday when I drew the receptor cell, the diagram was a bit smaller, so I could not draw it clearly. Today I am drawing it clearly. So these are special proteins with the help of which these receptacles, they are present near to the end of the axon terminal, right? Or the presynaptic terminal. Who remembers the name of these proteins? Snare protein or snare complex. Alright guys? Next thing. These axon nerve endings, there is a little difference than rest of the axolemma. This is also is a membrane, right? But the axon nerve ending, it has a little difference in its structure than rest of the axolemma. Over here, there is presence of calcium ion channels. So what are these? These are calcium ion channels. Now, these calcium ion channels have very important role in the transmission of nerve impulse. Yesterday I gave you the example and I taught you. What happens when the nerve impulse will reach over here? When the nerve impulse, it will reach over here. In response to that, remember, these calcium ion channels, they are voltage gated channels. Right? So in response to the voltage, what happens that these calcium ion channels, they open. They open. When the calcium ion channels will open, at that time what will happen? That the calcium from the outside will move to the inside. From higher concentration to lower concentration. Right? What happens to this calcium which has gone in from higher concentration to lower concentration? It binds to what? Snare complex or snare proteins, right? When it binds to the snare complex, what happens? The snare proteins, they contract. When the snare proteins, they will contract, what will happen? These vesicles, they will come closer to the membrane, and when they will come closer to the membrane, exocytosis will take place, right? I can show that over here in the next diagram. Remember that. What has happened? Calcium ions, they have come, and these calcium ions, they have bind to what? To the snare complex, right? Now what will happen? I can show like this, that the snare complex, they will contract and those vesicles, they will join like this. These vesicles, they will join like this. Now remember that this is what? This is pre-synaptic terminal. This is what? Post-synaptic terminal. Over here, this is what? Synaptic cleft. Now remember that inside these vesicles, what was present? Neurotransmitters, right? Now because of exocytosis, what will happen? These neurotransmitters, they will be released into the synaptic cleft. Now, these neurotransmitters, they have come here into the synaptic cleft. Now, interestingly, on the surface of the post-synaptic terminal, there are receptors present. Now, what are these? These are neurotransmitter receptor. What are these? Neurotransmitter receptors. These neurotransmitter receptors, what they will do? They will go and they will bind to the receptor proteins. Now, right away, when they will bind to the receptor proteins, what will happen over here? Sodium voltage gated channels, they will become what? They will open. Right? The start of the influx of the sodium will start from higher concentration to lower concentration. Inside will become more positive, inside will become more negative. Inside will become more positive, outside will become more negative. Understand? And a nerve impulse will be transmitted. Remember, the first step of depolarization. Sodium channels open, potassium channels remain closed. Sodium potassium pump stops working. Remember that or not? The whole process will take place in response when the neurotransmitter will attach or bind to the receptors. Right? So this is how the nerve impulse is transmitted across a synapse. Understand? Listen again. What do we have? Pre-synaptic terminal, post-synaptic terminal. This can be an axon nerve ending and this can be a dendrite nerve ending. You have a question? Okay. The gap in between is called synaptic cleft. There are small vesicles present inside, and these vesicles contain what? Neurotransmitters in them. And an example I have given you, let's suppose these are acetylcholine. You see these neurotransmitters are there. And I told you guys that the membrane of the nerve ending is a bit different than the axolemma. It has calcium channels. When the nerve impulse reaches over here, because of the depolarization and voltage change, calcium ion channels they open. Calcium ions move from outside to the inside, and these calcium ions they attach with what? Snare complex. These are contractile proteins. They contract. Inshallah, in the next topic which we are going to learn, the contraction of the muscles, the calcium ions are required for the contraction of the muscles. If the calcium ions are not there, the muscles will not contract. We are going to learn that inshallah. So, these snare complexes will contract, and these vesicles they will come close to the membrane, and exocytosis will take place. Because of exocytosis, neurotransmitter will be released in the synaptic cleft, in the gap. Then they will cross the gap and they will reach to the postsynaptic terminal where there are neurotransmitter receptors are present. They will bind to the neurotransmitter receptor, which will cause the change, and because of that, sodium influx will start. And outside will become more negative, inside will become more positive, and nerve transmission is started. Now here, a question which can come in the exam. This neurotransmitter is released in the synaptic cleft. If it stays there, it will keep on exciting the postsynaptic terminal. Can it do or not? Because it is there. It keep on binding, going and binding to the receptor. So the nerve impulse can continue. Rather the stimulus is, now the stimulus is not coming anymore, but the nerve impulse is going and going. Should it happen? No. It should not happen anymore. So what happens? Once the neurotransmitter has transmitted the nerve impulse, there are enzymes that break down the neurotransmitters. Now, I told you guys that let's suppose that this neurotransmitter is what? Acetylcholine. The enzyme that breaks down the acetylcholine, that enzyme is acetylcholinesterase. You need to memorize this name. And you also need to memorize this acetylcholine. Right? So acetylcholine is broken down by acetylcholinesterase. So question is, what will happen to the broken down acetylcholinesterase? The broken down parts of the acetylcholinesterase, of acetylcholine will be taken back by the cell. Acetylcholine is not going back. The byproducts of the broken down acetylcholine, they go back and they will be reused for production of acetylcholine again. Understand? So this is very important. So what do we say that? Broken down parts of acetylcholine, they are taken back. Right? And yes, to resynthesize the acetylcholine. Got it? So what will happen? That inside broken down parts of acetylcholine are used to re-synthesize the acetylcholine, so that if another stimulus comes, so that another nerve impulse can be transmitted. All right? Now, next thing, I was saying that dopamine, serotonin, GABA, they may be present in the rest of the body as well, but they are more abundant in where? In the brain. Right? Let me write down. More abundant. Now, why they are more abundant over there? Because their receptors are over there. Right? Now, let me give you one example. You have heard about a disease called Parkinson's disease. Do you know what is the symptoms of Parkinson's disease? Babaji's own vibration. Always vibrating. Right? Uncontrollable movement of the muscles. Why is that? The dopamine receptors, they become less in the brain. The control center of the brain that controls the skeletal muscles, the muscles which are voluntary muscles. At that time, dopamine receptors, they become less, or the production of dopamine can decrease. Right? So in that case, the Babaji go on vibration. Yes. What happens? You see, remember, there is a thing called aging. If you guys remember, I taught you that the number of nerve cells in your body, they increase up till age of 2 only for you guys, right? For me as well. Up till the age of 2. After the age of 2, what happens? Aging starts. Same, the number of cells, they increase up till puberty. After that, the aging process starts. Right? Same thing is with the brain as well. So the number of cells, they are decreasing. But you see, in some people, because of different physiological or some other reasons, this process becomes speed up. It can be genetic as well. It can maybe that you see this problem runs in the family. Right? So because of that, it happens. Right? And remember one thing, I told you guys that there is white matter and gray matter. The gray matter contains cell bodies. And cell bodies of what? Relay neurons and motor neurons. Right? While the white matter contains what? Myelinated axons. Myelinated axons. Right? Because that is the fatty part. Alright? So, that is because of now. How can we treat that Parkinson's disease? That by, you see, they can increase the production of dopamine by giving, you see, some medicines. or they can inject dopamine to the person, right? So if there are even less number of receptors left, they will go and bind to the receptors and they will cause more stimulus, right? Understand? Another disease you may have heard, Alzheimer's disease, in which dementia happens, loss of memory. In that what happens? The brain starts shrinking. Because the brain cells, they start dying. Now remember, the brain is a hard disk. Do you know how the memories develop? I am teaching you this. You are memorizing this. How do you remember these things? The number of connections increase between the nerve cells. As you learn more, the more number of connections develop between the certain centers of the brain which are for memory. Right? So when these connections will be made, you will learn more. Right? And if those cells they die, which have those connections, so what will happen? Loss of memory. Understand? Now, these dopamine and serotonin, they are also called happy hormones. They are called endorphins. They come under the group of endorphins. Now, usually, this dopamine and serotonin, they control the behavior of a person as well. When you are happy, you are relaxed, and usually it happens after the exercise or some other activity, right? So at that time, these dopamine and these serotonin, they are released, and they go and bind to the receptors, which give your body relaxation. All right? All right.